Welcome to Inside Talks, brought to you by Outlook in association with Johnson Tiles. This is a conversation series with architects and designers. It's not typically about their landmark projects or awards they won. It's about them as a person, as a creator, a master, and a learner. The interviews are taken by filmmaker Aradhna Seth in very informal and free-flowing style. And let me tell you, every conversation has very interesting and inspiring stories. Hello and namaste. I am Dinesh Vyas and I welcome you to Inside Talks, brought to you by Outlook in association with Prism Johnson. In this episode, you will meet Mumbai-based celebrated architect Mr. Salil Ranadive. He is one of the very few professionals who started their own practice straight after college. And you know, his very first commission, the Arressa Art Gallery in Bombay, designed in partnership with Anisha, received the Indian Institute of Interior Designers Inaugural Award for Public Places. While talking to Aradhna Seth, actually he has made some very interesting remarks about the awards. His project span a wide range of scales and typologies such as Marine Drive Initiative, the Songbirds development outside Pune, and a vision plan for the Jamnagar Pan Urban Vision. He also remembered his interactions with the visionary industrialist Mr. Dhirubhai Ambani when he was doing Reliance Township project. In this interview, he has talked freely about many other things related to life and profession. We also sought his advice to the young professionals, and he has given some great insights. So come, let's join him at Inside Talks.
What led you into architecture?
I grew up around architecture. My father was an architect. He was a partner in this very venerable firm called Gregson, Batley and King in Bombay, and who've done some like serious architecture here. Bombay Central Station, NSCI, CCI, the whole shebang. And I used to go there on Saturdays because I used to like to draw. And so, I used to go and hang out in their studio, and they would, some of their senior staff would give me crayons and color pencils and large pieces of paper. So that used to be really fun for me to do. And I used to love to draw. I used to just draw all the time and all kinds of things, not just building. So it was, I was aware of it, but father would drag me and take me to sites sometimes. So some of the buildings that are now been around Bombay for a long time, I've actually probably been there when I was a little kid. And, I used to hang out with the carpenters when they were putting the shuttering together. So I kind of knew what it all was, and, so I saw it being made around me. And then when I declared, when I was kind of older in school and stuff, that I wanted to, perhaps pursue architecture, I think my biggest sort of obstacle was my father. I think he wanted to make sure that I was doing or choosing to do it for the right reasons, and not because it's the easiest choice for someone whose father is already an architect. His practice and the office that he was with wasn't one of those sort of hand-me-down kind of practices. I mean, you had to earn your way to get a partnership. It was that sort of a practice, and that is perhaps why it was such a successful and perhaps India's longest lasting practice, because it was sort of literally based on merit. And then he sort of, pushed me into probably going to try. If he says, you really want to do it, why don't you go and try and get a seat in this toughest school that is around, And then when I actually finished, I did intern with them with my father's practice, but was pretty sure that I didn't want to necessarily join it. And I said, if I join it, I should join on from a position of merit, like a position of strength. So he said, let's, set up my own shop here. A classmate of mine, we had not finished yet. We were still doing our dissertation when someone he knew actually offered us a job, and it was a art gallery. So first we said, if they're going to sell salwar kameez from there, we don't want to do this. They all call themselves art galleries. So they said, no, this is actually for for art and they want to, sell paintings and stuff. So, okay, so let's go and meet this. That's how it started. The two of us we had actually not even graduated. And we did this gallery. It was at Kemp's Corner. It was called Arressa Art Gallery. It was one of the Kilachand, lady, Beena Kilachand was our first client that we ever had. And that art gallery actually won a prize. Yeah. And among the first awards that the Indian Institute of Architects actually set up then, and we put in an entry and we won an award for a public place. And then frankly, I thought, if we even, as students, if you can win this award, we don't need to enter it again. So I've never ever entered that award again after that. But yeah, we thought we should have, had done a pretty good job with that, really.
I think it'll be great to hear about some of your projects, the ones that you've been involved with.
Well, I think the most, let's say, long-lasting and enduring project that we've been part of is the Reliance Township in Jamnagar. I was very young. I was probably in my early 30s, and they said, we are planning to put up this refinery in Jamnagar, and they'd already started working with this American firm Bechtel that was doing all the actual process part of it. And there were these discussions in the company about the township, and they needed to put it up, and there are a whole bunch of people from the public sector who are all part of this oil company, petroleum company that set up. And I was, we just one day visited Jamnagar. There was they were still actually buying land, or they had sort of acquiring this land for the township at that time. It became a thing where they said, you want to show us what kind of a township can be made here. So sure, we sort of, do that. And in those days, you didn't have computers like this. It was still the mid 90s. Yeah. So we made this massive, large drawing. It was like a carpet-sized drawing of the whole township, and hand drawn, hand colored. It was 400 acres, and they needed about 2,800 odd houses, and of so many different typologies. And then it was far away from the town, so it had to be self-sufficient. So it needed like a school, a market, everything, a medical center, amenities, shopping, everything. So it was like a self-contained township in this crazy rush, because you had to, obviously the plant had already, started construction. So obviously you get it ready before, so you were actually running behind the clock. I actually missed my second kid's birth because I was stuck there and my wife had to deliver. So that was the way it was. It had become a way of life of putting that project together. Thankfully, we're still part of it. We still do work there. But it was, in fact, it was a drawing that I had to present one day to Dhirubhai himself, and it was quite bizarre. Luckily, nobody told me that I'm going to meet him later in the evening. So, they said, drawing leke aa jao, kind of thing. And then one evening, suddenly I realized, my God, he's going to be there himself. I said, thank God for a person who was in his early 30s that you don't tell them you don't know how to meet the,
And I think there was not so much hype at that time also. I think if you had met him also, it was like...
Right. He did meet him and it was quite wonderful. And I think something that he told me then is something that I still carry in all other projects. He said, you make sure that the wives and families don't ever want to leave this place. That's between you and me. So if anybody tells you, that which will affect that, he's saying, then you come to me and we'll figure it out. And if you look at it and think about it, it's probably the most important thing that you need to do in a staff housing place. That you just make sure that the families want to continue to live here. So it's then you realize, that it's not that you have to make photogenic buildings, because the brochures are what the builders use to sell their products. They don't give a shit about what's inside. They don't give a shit about how long, how difficult it is to maintain something. What the actual quality of life will be, whether the sunlight comes in, whether I feel good here. When you start thinking about it, you realize perhaps the environment is more important than the actual building here. I ended up in Ahmedabad to study with in SEP, where Doshi was then very active, and I think we got him at the right age. He was perhaps in his early 50s when he and a whole bunch of people with him who were all around that age and full of energy, and they were also And they started, they used to talk about all these things all the time, about, just the making of architecture. And it wasn't about, to objectify things. It was the quality of life, the touch and feel, this whole idea of, the fact that, it has to be an experience rather than just a visual thing. And sometimes you actually, think where, because now it's become so, with all these 3D and the renderings and all that it's only become visual. Nobody talks about the sound and the tangible sort of texture. It's all Instagram, and you take a picture of something, and and people start believing that just a visual image.
And how do you feel that, say, let's say flooring or glass has changed from when you studied architecture to now?
Okay. So the time when we did the township is an interesting time in a sense, India's history, because we had just blasted our second atomic, that Pokhran, with Vajpayee ji as the prime. So there was actually sanctions on India. So business was tough in India at that time, and this one project was, I think, perhaps equal to a huge part of our GDP, just the fact that this project was being done. So it was an interesting thing, that obviously, not spending a lot of money was very important. So obviously we, use as much local stuff as possible. So very close to Jamnagar is Morbi, where a lot of the, really good tiles get made. So we use mosaic tiles, which were all locally available from Morbi. We used, a lot of only Vimal fabrics. They did not have in the whole of Gujarat enough industry to put up furniture for these houses. So we set up one whole, carpentry unit. There were like carpenters there who were making beds, and if you told 2,500 people to go around looking for furniture, they would probably not come back for the next 2 months. They would not find people. So we did move into, as it happened, we do a lot of work with corporates, but not just offices. I mean, when you say corporates, it's not just, a lot of, let's say, companies. And they have all kinds of needs. And, we have done like fire stations for people, with their need in the plants. And then you need sometimes a creche, you need just a big, huge, cafeteria, dining halls. And so they could be wonderfully different things. And lots of times it's like learning, suddenly we had to learn because they wanted to put up a burns unit. So it's not just a medical center and a thing, but a burns unit. So we had to actually go and talk to doctors and, try and figure out. I mean, we were doing a fire station, and they were actually discussing about how fast we can fill those tankers. We've done work, projects in Bombay city. And Bombay, most of the work you do is either if they're private homes or something, which are very, very, very few, or then you're working with developers. Because of the land values and the selling prices and all, the priorities are not architecture in Bombay. It's not possible to be, everything else is a priority but architecture. They're just the means to earn the money. So it's no fun doing it as an architect. If you're little, things, so it's fine. I mean, there are lots of architects who do that kind of work, but we don't enjoy doing it. But what we've done or managed to get and do in Bombay is probably recycling, projects. So you're doing work in, in Parel, we just recently did in Parla for the Parle G, the Parle Products company, where it's, they've sort of, they don't produce any biscuits in Parla anymore. So, I mean, one of the things that Parla lost is the smell of the vanilla when you even went by train, and you could just, it was amazing. You'd be fast asleep on a train journey and you'd wake up because you realize you're passing Parla. You get this, aroma of, and so they've emptied out that whole place. But they don't want to just, luckily they don't want to sit and just sell the place and build buildings there. So we've actually repurposed some of the buildings, and one of the things that we repurposed recently was a 90-odd-year-old factory building, and where they moved their entire corporate headquarters in this old building. And that the whole thing was to retain the building, and then when you look at it environmentally with all the latent carbon, which is embedded in it, and you don't just knock it down and rebuild something new. So we've actually done this whole thing with getting their history together, using some of the old materials of that were around in Bombay even 100 years back, and made a very contemporary, today's sort of a building, in that factory shed. So there was a boiler room which had a double height, which then became the atrium. But we've kept the structure of it the way it is. And, to sort of this whole thing of embodied energy, which everybody's talking about now, we said, how do you demonstrate that this can actually be done in a very, very contemporary way? I mean, it's a completely contemporary office, but it's like, originally an old building. So we made sure that there's a plaque there, even that you're walking into places where this company started. We did something similar some years ago in the heart of Parel, where again, in the heart of, you walk around in Parel and you realize there's KEM and a whole bunch of these old institutions in Parel area. It was, so there is again as much of heritage architecture in Parel as there is in Fort. It's all hidden, and it's scattered, and it's not sort of so fashionable to talk about the buildings in Parel as much as, the South Bombay. There was an old shed, and, there was this guy who's, who owns it, who was giving it out to this very corporate entity, and so they came to us to help them do an office there for them. And so they obviously everybody starts talking about steel and glass and everything. And I said, you're in Parel, why do you want to do steel and glass? We actually did again a similar sort of a thing of using the same stone, and we used the proportions of those old stone windows, but played with the way they need it to be. They don't need to all be very, don't make another Gothic or, building with it. So it's a very contemporary building, but reusing everything in that area, and it gives you, so we did, we'd like to do that. So it's a repurposing sort of a project which you can then do in Bombay and show that some of these, what otherwise looks like dilapidated parts of the city could actually be, become gentrified, become popular again. The arts are about patronage. It's a big thing in times past that, it used to be the Raja Maharaja, bade families, whether it's Medici or whether it's, Zamindari, whether it's Sarabhais, it was the people who had, but them then to be, to be aware of what to promote. Because that was how, all the arts, whether it's music, you see all those gharanas, all the singers, you see the painters, you see, they all, so you have these patrons. And now, that's difficult to find. And so I think it's, so lots of times I tell even, my friends who are running architectural magazines and stuff, I say, don't just make architects into stars. Why don't you make it worth the while of the people who promote architecture, the owners, and sort of give them sometimes, corporates. You see LIC, for example, they built this wonderful headquarters. As it happened, it was Gregson Batley King, my dad's company that. But the one in Delhi that Charles Correa did, they sort of, in a way, actually promoted architecture. Then it's not about lowest bidder and all that nonsense. You actually, so then you become, it sort of expands around, it sort of makes, the sort of quality of everything go up. Because then it's, in a way, it's top down. I mean, you got to look at railways, look at the old stations, what they built. It's, and then you start, now of course there is a thought about trying to redo it, but if it's going to be in the steel and glass alucobond looking thing, I'm saying it's the gateway to the city. You look at it metaphorically, or think that it's the gateway to the city. You arrive there, whether it's a small town, that's the first place you enter. So what should it be here? But now when you look at the suburbs of any city in India, they all look the same, and it's all not even, it's just banal crap. It's really sad.
Could you tell us a little bit about the history of flooring from when you learnt and studied architecture till today?
Ahmedabad is, as I said, the School of Architecture then is like the joke there, because everybody uses Kota stone in all their work. So it's all Kota stone. And it's amazing how much Kota stone is used and how beautifully it's done in Ahmedabad. And it's the biggest names, the best of houses are with Kota stone. And here, when we finished and came back, and then we were trying to, sort of do projects in Bombay, and you suggest Kota stone to people, and they look at you like, really annoyed, like, do you think I can't afford anything better? Until you realize that the Saravai houses in Kota stone, but nobody, so it figures out, of how things work. So Kota stone, I still love it. I just, then of course discovered honey brown Kota over the years, which is also fantastic. Mosaic tiles, terracotta, the whole Morbi area, I used to make these tiles. And then of course you started getting then ceramic tiles, they used to be, then of course people used to use them mostly only then in wet areas. And then vitrified tiles came in.
Like when you're doing architecture, when you have an architectural practice, how much you bring technology into it?
Into the practice?
Into the making.
Into the making.
Yeah.
Well, you can't escape technology now. Yeah.
Technology and architecture.
So we enjoy it. It's not something that we hold back on. But you don't get overwhelmed with it. I mean, I still honestly don't know how to draft on the AutoCAD and stuff. I mean, I'm very happy that I don't. I still feel, at the end of the day that I'm content when this part of my palm gets all black with lead because I've been sketching and then all the, the lead comes. I love it. I feel that, yes, okay, I've done, a good amount of work for the day. But there's no escaping the production of drawings because it's now become very important. The whole overlaying of utilities and everything has become it's become complex. I mean, systems, equipment, machinery, you have air conditioning, plumbing, pressure, all kinds of things that happen, firefighting. All the systems have to be overlaid. There's a lot of compliances to deal with in terms of permissions and stuff. So these things are inescapable, and then of course you've got, even products that are available which, for example, plumbing products that need certain amount of pressure for them to work properly. So a lot of it is technical and, so as much as everything you want this sort of, beautiful environment, friendly, tactile, etc. space, all this other stuff's got to fit in and, be relevant and it has to work here. And glass, for example, you've got, low E glass, it doesn't let in that much of the radiation, so you can control it. So these are things that you couldn't do 20, 30 years ago. The question is, if you're involved as a designer, as an architect, as a fashion designer, as a stylist or sort of a thing, you kind of tell these people that, this is the alternative and this is, and demonstrate, not just tell them on wherever one gets the opportunity. To say this is the better way to do it, it's just, it's easier for it to last longer. I mean, sometimes just sustainability becomes words which people get scared of, honestly. So, they become more expensive. And one has to be able to convince these people, about saying that it'll just, because lots of times people don't understand, they think that it's just a very fashionable thing to say, there'll be local employment and the guy is aspiring, he's saying, boss, मैं अभी rich बन गया है, तो मेरे को Italian marble चाहिए, and he said, I can afford to get it, I don't care what it costs. Now, where are you going to talk about carbon credits with a person like this? It's very tough here. So you need to figure out how, so if he can want to see something which is, sort of locally made and fantastic and aspirational, then you hit the jackpot. Yeah. Well, the kids who come out of schools now are pretty well prepared. Yeah, I mean, in fact, it's sad that a lot of them don't know how to sharpen a pencil. They keep asking me, so why do I need to know how to sharpen a pencil? I don't even need to use a pencil. So they're pretty, cued into all the software, and they, I do go for juries, and you see them, presenting, their in various schools. Their projects, and they're all like very savvy. I mean, lots of times, I think sometimes they can't control the fact that this software can do so much more than they can. So the projects go for a toss because they don't know how to separate out like communicating an idea and what the software can do.
Yeah, and the thought process that goes in, which is the main
idea.
Ultimately,
I mean, the rest of it is just a way of communication. So in that way it is, and then of course even now the making of buildings themselves, the technology helps you to even make buildings. I mean, at the end of the day, when you start talking about 3D printing, there are projects which the army has been talking about. And imagine if you have to sit and do a bunker somewhere in the front line. Who's going to get someone to build it? You just 3D print the damn thing.
So what advice would you give them, or if you were starting off today, what advice would you?
I would personally still tell them to learn to draw. I think that's still something that you need to know to do. I think that sort of it sort of that touch between you and that material when you actually draw on it, and then you see something and then you even have to just copy what you're seeing and then using this proportion and then putting it together. I think there is a different learning which doesn't come out of a machine. And lots of time when you see the machine, it's ultimately, most of the time people have screens which are this small. I can make a drawing that large.
And talking about here, can you tell us about your other interests, in particular jazz?
Well, it's something that has grown over the years. Of course, Ahmedabad was a big place where one got exposed to it a lot because there was a lot of it going around on the campus. And then this whole idea of and then you sort of look at it with Indian classical music and the sort of the connections that go with it, as compared to Western classical music where the basis itself is different. And then you start actually understanding how Indian classical musicians can sort of do fusion with jazz musicians, and you realize the commonality that allows some sort of a rhythm, whereas Western classical is all harmony, and then this rhythm allows you to then do whatever the hell you want within that, and then sort of the Indian classical you pick the notes, and you pick like 4 notes to play in this frequency. But then how you sort of render them every time is completely different. And in jazz, you don't even have those 4 notes. You can do whatever you want, but so there is that whole mathematics and music and this whole thing then ultimately of being able to design something, that is so mental, that it is sort of thing. So while you're actually at it, you're designing, when you're. So I think it all sort of gels well with the way I sort of like to do things. So I enjoy it. I really thoroughly enjoy it. And then of course this connection between just even across genres. So it goes beyond just the act of listening. So of course I like the sound, the way it sounds. But then when you sort of put it together, it's sort of
And it influences your architectural practice?
Yeah, I can't necessarily say that this music was inspired, or this building was inspired by this. But yes, of course it does. I have it on, there's a speaker right next to me and, it's playing through the phone now. And it's always there, playing. Sometimes you only listen to something that is focused on one instrument, just the piano or the saxophone or whatever, or vocals. Or sometimes it's just like something which is a larger, but it's always there. It's always playing the whole day. Green architecture.
Meaning bringing in, sustainable green elements. What's happening on that score?
It's a interesting sort of subject. If you go back maybe 200-300 years, every Indian architectural example was perhaps already a green sustainable architecture. Reintroducing ourselves to it, or re-engaging with them, because lots of them are just very sensible ideas. You sort of, look at even just say...
Even the courtyard idea, for instance.
No, just so look at buildings in Bombay versus, say, hot, dry climates of Delhi or Rajasthan or Ahmedabad or places. And you see the ones in the coastal part. And there's a difference in the way the buildings are, purely because it's common sense. You needed a courtyard in the hot dry areas because you want the courtyard to get hot, so that then that hot air rises and it pulls in the cooler air from the side and it becomes like a convection current, and that's your haveli. And they didn't have much of a street front and they always packed each other, so you made sure that the walls don't get hot. So you only had one wall which was facing the street, which had a lot of jalis on it, so you don't let the sun just hit one flat surface. So then now when you see it in terms of, say, sort of in contemporary solutions, that then is it sensible to make large flat walls because you say I'm doing minimalistic stuff? Because now you're letting that wall heat up, and then you're going to now trying to figure out how to cool it down, and then you say, can I get a LEED platinum rating? Now I'm saying if you were sensible, I'm not saying you have to do the same carving again, but now you be creative, of how do you make sure that the wall doesn't get heated up, because the moment it gets heated up, now you got a problem. So in this region, which is the western coast region, at least I'd say, the walls were inside because the bigger problem here with the heat, rather than the heat, is the monsoon, is the walls getting wet. So earlier, when we were young and we went to any of these very, sort of more, let's say, homes around the coast, whether here, Goa, wherever, around the Konkan, Kerala, people didn't complain about leaking walls because the walls were not getting wet, because the roof would go all the way out and make sure the wall never gets wet. So the wall perhaps was terrible when it came for, of being waterproof, but they made sure that the wall didn't get touched with water in the first place. So the whole veranda would be around the house, and that's where you conducted your, like this conversation would happen in the veranda basically. You get the breeze blowing through, and you'd have like a. Then the other thing is that the roofs and the whatever you had was made up of smaller units. So you'd have terracotta tiles, the roofing, or you'd have the little wooden lattice railings. So what would happen in the year, maybe 10 of them break. So you can afford to just replace those 10 tiles. You don't have to redo the whole roof here. You'd have a few of those vertical dandas of the veranda would break and they would replace it. So even this is sustainable. Anybody can, just the house still is nice, it's clean, and the walls that could get wet are protected, or they could get hot are protected. And so now the thing is that the new bylaws don't allow this. They'll say, oh, it's counted and not counted. So you're in fact almost pushing people to do these silly buildings, which are based on some formula, because every formula will lead to a type of building. Now, if you don't let people build, sort of within the bylaws, have courtyards or these verandas, then they're never going to get built. So one of the advantages, say, of working with, say, corporates is the fact that they don't make buildings to sell. They make buildings for themselves. All corporates are making, whatever, it's their own office, their own canteen, their own. So one thing that we did learn early in our practice was the fact that the maintainability of a building for the corporates is more important than necessarily the photogenicness of it. So I don't have to put that building on a brochure, but his project, his estate guys are going to come and say, you make this very fancy looking double height space, and he used to come and say, ki wo light kaise change karna? He said, every time I want to change a light, I don't have to call the fire brigade and get me a snorkel, So it's okay in a mall, somebody, you don't care, they build it, they sell it, This is my own, corporate office. I cannot have someone walking into my corporate office with 3 of the lights not working. So I have to be able to maintain them on a daily basis. So don't give me stuff. So now you start thinking differently. You say, okay, I want that 8-meter height, but can I put the lights not at 8 meters, but somewhere at 4 meters, which can shoot up and you still get the kind of lighting you want. Yeah, so now you think of it differently, etc., etc. So you work, now these are things that we have to be able to address, We can't pretend that we're living in Manhattan, but have 5 servants in the house, and then not have places for them to sleep and figure out where you're going to dry your clothes, because nobody here wants to buy a dryer. You say power jata hai. But we are building buildings and you're trying to, make these. You see all the hoardings up there and say, oh, this lifestyle, and everybody's wearing these little short skirts and have these hair blowing and all that. People don't live like this. These are not Indian people. I mean, what kind of dreams are you trying to sell? They're completely, and the houses are like, for whatever it's worth, I don't do it in my own house, but 90% of people take out their shoes when they enter the house. Where's the space here? You open the door and you're in the guy's living room. So where do the shoes go? And those were there earlier. You go to any of the old houses, there will be one small little place that you could stick your, dripping umbrella into, or, keep your chappals there. And they're not designed anymore. You don't have place for drying clothes. You don't have, so then all the fancy elevations that architects make, I've got only torans of clothes hanging, you know, it's a Marathi or Gujarati word where it's just these clotheslines. The whole building facade is clotheslines. That's all you see because you don't have anything to, you know, because it's not designed for the way we live.
These insight talks will acquaint you with the architect's professional approach, values that they respect and expect, their philosophy, and above all, how they look at life, other people, and this very planet. Let us join the respected professional at Inside Story. And just to add, Prism Johnson is engaged with the fraternity of designers in multiple ways, which includes publication of reputed journal Insight. You can also receive very rich and professional content by subscribing to the newsletter from insidereview.in. Thank you very much.